الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف وجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره. In the last session, we talked about the benefits of self-knowledge. And something which is very important is to realize that every single act, every single memory, thought, idea, intention may have some effect upon our soul. And then I promised to talk about the difference between morality and law, between akhlaq and fiqh, which you find it in the book, but because of its significance, we need to talk about it more. Normally, we say that Islamic teachings can be divided into three major areas. One is beliefs, those things that we should believe, those things that we should know and accept. It's not just enough that we know. We must also know and accept and admit. Like, for example, we should know that there is God. And in addition to knowing that there is God, we must be able to commit ourselves to this faith, to declare this, to admit this. Or, for example, we should believe in the necessity of being guided through revelation. There is a need for prophets to come and help us in understanding what is right and what is wrong. Also, for example, the faith in resurrection. So these are beliefs, which is a very important part of any religion. The second major area is what we are told, we are taught to do or not to do. What are our religious obligations, our religious requirements? What should our practice be? This is what we call Sharia. And we believe that Islamic Sharia governs every aspect of human life, whether it is personal life, it's family life, society, business, whatsoever. There is some kind of guidance from Sharia about that matter. And this is where we believe that everything, either it is compulsory, obligatory, wajib, or it is mustahab, which means recommended, or it is mubah, which is permitted, or it is recommended not to do. It's better not to do it. But if you do it, it's not considered as a sin. And this is makruh, disliked. And those things which are totally prohibited, and these are haram. So everything from a legal point of view is to be meeting one of these five. Okay? And this is Sharia, which is very important. But we have also something more. It's not just beliefs and just Sharia. We have also morality. We have also akhlaq. And akhlaq is very important. What is the difference between Sharia and akhlaq? Or what is the difference between fiqh and akhlaq? This is very technical discussion. And even after centuries of scholarship, still there is a need to work out the relation between fiqh and akhlaq. And I remember that 2 years ago we had a meeting of many scholars with a very great scholar, great philosopher. And he was telling that this is something that still we need to work out to fully clarify the relation between fiqh and akhlaq. So what I'm going to, inshallah, do is to give you some idea that help you to understand the difference between fiqh and akhlaq. In akhlaq or morality, what we are aiming at is to know what are the qualities of the soul which are good and we should obtain them, we should acquire them, and what are the qualities of the soul which are bad and we should remove them, we should refrain from. Also, in akhlaq, we learn what are good acts to be done and what are the bad acts not to be done. And here you come close to fiqh. So I repeat, in akhlaq, we learn what are good qualities of the soul and what are the bad qualities of the soul. We know the good qualities so that we achieve them. And if we already have them, thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our own efforts, to cultivate them, to strengthen those good qualities. What are the bad qualities? So that if we have them, we try to remove. If we don't have them, to safeguard ourselves from those bad qualities. But also we learn in akhlaq what are the things which are morally right, what are the things which are morally wrong. So those actions also are to be learned from akhlaq. So here the question is, okay, what happens if for the same act you have a legal requirement and also a moral requirement? Do they always come in the same way? Do they always confirm each other, or they may be different? What is their position? To be able to address this question properly, I first need to tell you what is the aim and objective. What are the aims and objectives for akhlaq, and what are the aims and objectives for fiqh? I need to use the board maybe to help you to understand better. Okay. When it comes to fiqh, which is the science or the discipline which is responsible for understanding religious requirements, for understanding Sharia, we should know that fiqh or Sharia, if you want to talk about the topic itself, first of all is to secure minimum requirements of happiness. This is very important. It's not mentioned in the book in this way, so it's good if you make note of it. Secure minimum requirements of happiness. What does it mean? It means that, when you are talking, suppose that you are the legislator, suppose you are introducing some law. You should imagine, you should know that all people are not at the same level. You have someone who has just become baligh, 15 years old, 9 years old, depending if it's a boy or girl. Or someone who may be a mu'min, practicing mu'min for decades. Someone may be educated, someone may be uneducated. Someone may be a scholar, someone may be lay people. So you should know that you cannot be too ambitious. Whenever you are legislating, you should always consider what can be expected from every person. What can be expected from average. This is very important. In law, you are mostly concerned with the average people, if not the weakest. Sometimes even in law, we are concerned with the most vulnerable people, the weakest people, because this is something that everyone then can do. If you target the weakest people, the people who are least capable, then everyone can do. Like, for example, one of the things which is recommended for imam of jama'ah who leads the congregational prayer is to consider the patience and the strength of the weakest members of jama'ah. So if there are people who have pain in their back, or they cannot stand, or they have pain in knees, so imam should observe these people. Should not say, okay, there are also young people who can stand on their feet for 1 hour. No, imam should consider as aful ma'mumin, the weakest people who are in the congregation. But normally, whenever they legislate a law, in any legal system, if it's to be done wisely, they consider average. For example, they say, if you want to drive safely in motorway, you should not exceed 70 miles. Okay? Why? Because average drivers with average cars can drive safely up to this speed. But there may be a person who is one of the champions in car racing. If he drives 100, maybe 20 miles would be much safer than someone who doesn't have that skill and drives 60 miles. Or cars may be different. But you cannot legislate law and say, okay, we leave it to you, yourself decide. We say you must drive securely, then you decide. This is not law. Law is something which can be regulated and brings harmony. And also then you can monitor whether people have been observing the law or not. You cannot leave it to the people and say, okay, you decide. So when it comes to Islamic law, to Sharia, the people who are considered are the average people. The people who, with average amount of understanding, average amount of education, average amount of intelligence can do it. Average amount of interest in spirituality can do it. You cannot expect all people to become Salman or Abu Zar and then introduce your Sharia in the way that you produce Salman and Abu Zar. You must know that there are people who even performing, these legal, requirements like 17 rak'ah prayer in the day, for them may be difficult. People who fasting just months of Ramadan, maybe for them is difficult. It's not like the people who can be more ambitious. So, in fiqh, what is really meant, what is really aimed at, is to tell the people that, okay, if you do these things, if you observe these things, you will be able to achieve the minimum amount of happiness and salvation. In other words, you will not be punished. You will not go to hell. You will be able to go to heaven. Okay? But if someone wants more, if someone wants to be more elevated and to go to higher levels of happiness, to be close to the prophets, imams, then it's not enough just we observe Sharia. We need something more. Okay? So, as you see, there is no way that one can think Sharia in a certain level becomes useless. This is mistake. This is mistake that some Sufis do, not all Sufis, some Sufis. They think that Sharia is for the beginners. When you reach certain level of perfection, then you no longer need to observe Sharia. And this is wrong. Why? Because as I explained, this is the minimum requirement. And when you have the ambition for more, you must always bring the minimum. If you want to have 100, for example, books, you cannot say, okay, up to now I had 50 books. Now that I want to have 100, I remove those 50 books. I throw them away. No, you have to keep those 50 and add upon those 50 more. Or if you want to go higher on a ladder, you cannot say, okay, because I am on the second or third step, I remove and cut the first step. No, then you will collapse. So we believe Sharia is always needed. There is no doubt about it. But what we say is that you must not be only aiming at observing legal requirements. There is much more to be achieved. Just let me give you an example. From a Sharia point of view, from a legal point of view, if someone is dying because he has no food or has no water, an innocent person is dying and has no food or water, am I required to help him or not? Of course, yes. There's no doubt about it. Even if I have already paid all my religious taxes, zakat and khums and whatsoever, but still there is a person who is dying and in need of my help. I have still to help him. I cannot say, okay, I have already paid my zakat. I have already paid my khums. No. Still, I have to help this person. But what is needed from a legal point of view? What is needed is something that saves his life. It can be a little bread. It can be maybe a little fruit, some fruit. Or it can be best meal. From legal point of view, it makes no difference. You are not obliged to give him the best food. From a legal point of view, something that you can expect everyone must do is to give him something that he can save his life. But what about moral point of view? From a moral point of view, you must give him the best you can. Not just a dried piece of bread. Say, okay, by eating this he will not die, so I give him. Or, what some countries do when they want to send aids to poor countries, they send either something which is outdated or, something which is not good for their market, they send it. They say, okay, we are helping these people. But from a moral point of view, this is not accepted. What does Quran say? Quran says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You cannot achieve goodness and piety until you give to the people what you love. So if I love this food for myself, this meal for myself, if I love this, for example, kebab or, curry or masala or whatsoever, so I should give from the same thing to the person who is in need. And even more. وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. Not only I should give them from what I eat, I should give the better one to the person who is in need, and then myself be convinced, to eat from something which is left. Maybe then I will eat a little dried bread, because I have given the good meal to the person who is needy. And this is the concept of ithar. Ithar means to give preference to the person who is in need. And something more than this is what we have in Surah Al-Ata. وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. Even nothing was left for the lady, Fatima Zahra. Not only she gave the good thing that they wanted to the other person, not only she did Isar, she did even something more. She left nothing for herself because they had something which was enough for themselves. And they gave all of it to the people who were needy in 3 successive days. So this is akhlaq. Okay? But can you expect everyone to be like Lady Fatima Zahra? No. And if you become too ambitious in your legal system, then you end up with a law which most of the people would find it impossible for themselves. Say, oh, you expect too much from us. Even such an easy Sharia that we have, really our Sharia is not difficult. People think it's difficult, but if we really understand Sharia, Sharia is not difficult. Islamic Sharia can be practiced in all circumstances. It's not very difficult. But still some people find it very difficult. Still some people complain. Say, oh, it's too much. Okay? So, in Sharia, in law, in fiqh, we are concerned with the minimum requirement of happiness, minimum requirement of perfection. Something that everyone, something that an average person can achieve. When it comes to akhlaq, no, in akhlaq, you must open up the possibilities for people with all different levels of ambitions to be able to make progress, to uplift themselves. And this is the beauty of Islam. At the same time that Islam clearly establishes Islamic law, but in Islamic spirituality says, okay, if you want more, come, there is something for you. If you are someone like Abu Zar, there is something for you. If you are someone like Salman, there is something for you. People in different levels can find their answers in Islamic spirituality. And this is why we have in many hadiths, you find them in also Usul al-Kafi, that there are different levels of iman, different grades of faith. And every person must be guided, must be expected according to the requirements of his own level. You cannot expect people too much. You cannot expect people something more than what they can really meet. So, this is one difference between Islamic morality or spirituality in general, because when I say spirituality, I mean akhlaq and irfan together, and Islamic law. Another thing which must be considered, which indeed originates from the first, is that in Islamic law, most of the time, not always, but most of the time we are concerned with the acts, not with the qualities of the soul, not with the attributes. For example, something which is very badly regarded in Islam is hasad, to be jealous. It's very bad. What does hasad mean? Yeah, it doesn't mean that if you see something good in someone, you want it for yourself. This is not hasad. If you see something good in someone and you want it for yourself, this is ghibta in Islamic literature. This is ghibta. Ghibta means that you want something good for yourself. Al-ghibta. Okay? Maybe in English, if you say envy, it doesn't make this distinction. But in Arabic, there is a difference between al-hasad and al-ghibta. Hasad is different. Hasad means that you see something good in someone or for someone, then you wish that goes away. That person loses that good quality. Whether you want it for yourself or not is not important. For example, I see my friend has good reputation. People respect him. Okay? So this makes me very angry. I wish my friend loses this position. He loses this blessing. Whether I want it for myself or not, it's not important. I am concerned really is that I don't want this to remain for him. Sometimes even people may hurt themselves so that the person that they don't like to be in good position be hurt. You may have heard the story. This is a well-known story that a person had such a rivalry with his neighbor that wanted to do whatever possible to harm him because of hasad. So whatever he was doing was not working. So finally he had a slave when there was a slavery. And he told his slave, "You must kill me and put my head on the roof of his house, so that when I am missing, people look everywhere to find me. And when they find my head on the roof of that person, they would say, okay, he is the killer." And then they would punish him. You see the amount of craziness that a person is endangering his life, causing his own murder, so that he may harm the other person. And his slave was not listening, but he insisted and said, "You must do this, and then you will be freed," and whatsoever. So he finally did what he said. He killed him and put his head on the roof of that person. So he went missing, people looked everywhere for him, and finally he found his head on the roof of that person. But before punishing him, everyone said, okay, if this man was the killer, why he kept the head on his roof? He must have disposed it somewhere else. So he must be innocent. So he couldn't even hurt him. Okay? So hasad is very, very, very bad thing. And we have in hadith, Al-hasad ya'kulu al-hasanat kama ta'kulu an-nar al-hatab. In the way that fire destroys dried piece of wood, hasad burns and damages all the good things that a person has. But ghibta is something good. Ghibta means that you see some good quality in someone and you want it for yourself. This is good. And indeed, we have in hadith that a mu'min is the one who has this quality of ghibta. A mu'min, whenever he sees a good quality in someone, wants it for himself as well. Okay? So, hasad is very bad thing. But unfortunately, the reality is that most of the people suffer from this. It's very difficult to be totally free from hasad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His mercy, does not punish us for hasad unless we act upon hasad. Okay? So, if I feel envy, if I in my heart feel bad that someone has some good qualities, for example, good children or whatsoever, but I don't do any act based on hasad. I don't tell lies, I don't commit ghaibah, I don't physically or spiritually harm that person, Allah is not punishing me. Okay? So from a fiqhi point of view, from a legal point of view, hasad is not being punished unless someone acts according to hasad. But what about moral point of view? Can I say, okay, let me have this quality of hasad, just I make sure that I don't act according to hasad? No. From a moral point of view, you must do your best to get rid of this bad quality. Because if you are jealous, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's light and love will not come to your heart. Because a person who is jealous, in the first place, he is condemning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and feels that Allah is not just in distribution of goods. Okay? And most of these people get angry with Allah. They say, why He has given this to that person? Okay? So, From a moral point of view, we must try to get rid of this bad habit. It's not just enough that I don't act according to that.
Think you find that in most cases when these things happen, they are acted upon because it's very difficult for a person to have a bad feeling towards another person that are experiencing it in some way or another, even if it is.
Yeah, but people with some control can make sure that they don't tell lies, they don't commit ghaibah. This is possible. But still in their heart, they may have, like for example, what? Sometimes people, hate another person. They don't do anything, but still this is bad that you hate a moment or a person who has no guilt. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, in terms of hasad, what about if it's a situation whereby there's a revenge, like there's a tyrant or a dictator?
Yeah.
You can hate that person, can't you? Or a murderer.
Yeah, that is not hasad. Yeah, that is some. Even in the case of a criminal who is going to be punished, what is important that this must not be because of my personal negative feeling towards that person. It must be because I feel that this person has done something wrong and must be punished. But I do this all in a very cool and in a very patient manner. Not that I want to satisfy, myself and I want to cool down my anger, so I am going to punish that person. And then I call this is Islamic punishment, or this is, for example, legal punishment or whatsoever. You remember the story of Imam Ali in the War of Khaybar, that even a person like Amr ibn Abdawud, in the battlefield, Imam didn't kill him because he split, to the face of Imam. Imam went walking and then came back. And we have in Islamic, a legal system that even a criminal who is going to be executed, no one, the judge or agents, no one is allowed to treat him badly or impolitely. They cannot say, okay, this man is a murderer, so we must curse him or do whatever we want. No. Allah said he is going to be punished. Okay, you must punish him. But you cannot satisfy your anger, by doing whatever you want with that person. But this is different from the concept of hasad. Okay. So, in the case of akhlaq, you don't think that because this is not a sin by itself, so it's okay. I leave it. No. Even if it is not a sin by itself, still it's a bad quality, it's an ugly quality. And you want to get rid of that. Or, for example, to be generous. I give you another quality, but which is good. This was a bad quality. To be generous from a legal point of view is not wajib. There is no mujtahid, no faqih who says that you must be generous. If you are not generous, you are committing sin. No. What is important is I give the people their due right. Okay? So for example, if I borrow money from the people, I should give them back. If I owe people some money, some service, whatsoever, I should render to them those services. But I don't need to be generous. Okay? This is from a legal point of view. But what about a moral point of view? To be generous is very highly recommended. And this is the character of the prophets and the character of Allah's friends and saints, to be generous. And indeed, this is to resemble to some extent Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, who is the most generous. He never gains anything from what he gives. His love is unconditional. Okay? So you see that something may be from a legal point of view, not necessary, but from a moral point of view, becomes present. Or let me give you another example. For example, to be brave. From a legal point of view, it's not wajib to be brave. What is wajib what is compulsory is that whenever there is an act which you must perform it, you should not let your fear stop you. Okay? This is wajib. For example, if I must say my prayer, and then I'm in the house alone, and it's dark, okay? So I may, be fearful. So I shouldn't say, okay, because I am frightened, so I don't say my prayer today. I wait till, it becomes, the day, and then no. Here, fear is causing a legal problem because it's stopping you from practicing what is wajib. Or, for example, if there is a battle and you must take part in that battle to defend your dignity or your nation or state or whatsoever, which is important. And because of fear, you don't take part. Here, it becomes legally prohibited. Okay? But just to be fearful as such is not haram. Okay? But from a moral point of view, this is a sign of weakness. This is something which is not good. If I am fearful, I must be brave. And I must know that everything is in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why I should be fearful? In the beginning of the revolution in Iran, 15 years before, Imam Khomeini came back, Imam Khomeini first was sent into exile for 15 years. So when they took him from Qom to Tehran, they were very scared because they thought that if people realize that they are taking, their marja, so it would create problems. So what they did, they switched off the car and they just pushed the car to the lane in which the house of Imam was there so that they make no noise. And they started knocking the door of the house of Imam Khomeini. And in that night, Imam Khomeini was sleeping in the opposite house, which was for his son. So they knocked the door, the servant came, and they said, where is Ruhollah Khomeini? He said, he's not here. So they started, beating him. And Imam was doing tahajjud in the opposite. So he opened the window and said, I am Ruhollah Khomeini. Why do you want, what do you want from this man? So they took him out. And they were very scared. Even on the way to Tehran, they didn't let Imam Khomeini to stop for his prayer. And Imam said, okay, let me just do some, for example, tayammum, whatsoever. They didn't let. They were very scared. So Imam Khomeini later said that in that time, I referred to my heart and I felt no fear at all. You are taking with the agents of the regime to you don't know where in such a situation, and you feel no fear at all. And indeed, he was telling those people, don't be frightened. There is no one, who is aware of us. No one is going to follow you. So, this is something that much more than fiqh. This is the spirituality, that a person doesn't fear at all. And in his life, he proved. This is not a claim that I may claim. And then when I see a cockroach, I am frightened. But someone like Imam Khomeini, his life, shows this. So, this is the difference between akhlaq and fiqh. Just in barakat, I should tell you, you find it inshallah in the book, that there are certain qualities that even from a fiqhi point of view, they are haram. We must be careful. You shouldn't think that, okay, all the qualities from a legal point of view are not haram. Like what? Like al-ya'su min rawhillah, despair from the mercy of Allah. Is this an act or a quality? It's a quality. or you may say this is an act of soul. So this is not act in the normal sense. But still this is haram. Even if you don't do anything, if you don't tell this to the people, you keep it to yourself, you don't act according to this, but still it is haram that you feel that the mercy of Allah is impossible to reach you. Even a person who has killed tens of prophets, okay, what can be worse than this? To kill tens of prophets. Still is not allowed to think that he will never be forgiven. There is always a chance for repentance and being forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So al-ya's min rawhillah is one of the major sins. Okay? Or on the opposite, al-amnu min makrillah, to feel safe from Allah's plans, from Allah's, you may say, tricks. Of course, Allah doesn't make trick, but it is counter tricks of yourself. So, for example, a person who does everything which is bad, then in the end thinks that Allah cannot do anything to harm him. This is al-amnu min makrullah, to feel you are safe and Allah cannot stop you, cannot harm you. This is also a major sin. So, you find sometimes, even in fiqh, that some qualities of the soul are considered to be haram. And this is because of their grave effect upon the spirit. If someone has this idea that he will never be forgiven, you know how he easily would be surrendering himself to shaitan? If I commit some sins, and then I think there is no chance to be forgiven. So do you think then I would stop committing sins? No. I would go on and on because I say, okay, there is no point. So even in Sharia it said that it's haram to feel despair. Okay, so let me summarize what we said because this is a very important discussion. So I said, in fiqh, we are mostly concerned with acts, mostly. There are very exceptional cases that in fiqh we talk about the qualities of the soul or about the attributes. Most of the time we are concerned with the acts. In akhlaq, we are concerned firstly with the qualities and secondly with the acts. Okay? Another difference is that in fiqh, we want something which can be practiced by average people. Something which would not be too difficult. Something that an old or a very young person, educated or uneducated, a person who lives in city or in village or in a desert or on mountain or in a cave, everyone can practice. Something in all ages, in modern age or pre-modern age or post-modern age, can be practiced. Okay? But in akhlaq, we want something which gives us guidance for the people who have higher capacities, who have higher intelligence, who have higher ambitions, who want to be the best or among the best. Okay? This is also another difference. Something else which is important and I should mention, because we have to cover the book in 8 sessions, at least most of it, and inshallah the rest you can read it yourself, is about one of the outcomes of self-knowledge, which I have mentioned here, and that is about a very important characteristic of human beings. which I have mentioned here. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us in the way that normally we understand and notice only changes. This is a very important point. Have you had this experience that sometimes you have those who wear glass? You have your glasses, but still you look for it. It's possible. Because it has been on your eyes for some time, then you don't notice it. Or sometimes, you know, you may have your watch or ring, and then still you look for it. Or something even more, you know, obvious. When you are putting on your dress, in the first place, you feel your dress. For example, if it is warm or hot, it is soft or not, you feel it. Okay? But after a while, you forget it. Just before I talked about this, you were not feeling your dress. Yeah? Or when you sit on a chair, in the beginning, you feel it. Otherwise, then you don't feel it. Unless it constantly is annoying you. Then that's different. But normally, we only notice new things. Or what I say, changes. Okay? This is a very important point. Why? Because if we were supposed to always pay attention to the things, then the very first thing that happens to me when I wake up would make me busy till I go to sleep. Then I couldn't leave, you know. So, by forgetting something, then I can pay attention to something new. Okay? Otherwise, we couldn't be active in our life. It is not possible for human beings to be like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That La yashghaluhu sha'nun and shan. One of the qualities of Allah is nothing make him busy so that he neglect another thing. If billions of people at the same time call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah can pay attention to all of them. But human beings normally can pay attention to one thing very clearly and seriously at a time. By training and education, you can increase. For example, when you first learn how to drive, you can only drive. If someone speaks to you, or if you, for example, you want to drink or eat, you cannot. Or listen to radio, you cannot. Okay? But when you are used to drive, then you can do something also in addition to driving. So it's possible to train yourself that at the same time pay attention to several things. Okay? But it's very unlikely that you can pay attention strongly to many, many things at the same time. For ordinary people, I'm talking about ordinary people. I'm not talking about the spiritual people. About the ordinary people. It's very unlikely. Okay, what happens then is that we pay attention to the things which happen, the things which are new, the things which just come. And this is very important, also defensive plan that Allah has given us. Because the things which are already there, somehow we have looked after them in advance. So we must be very concerned about the things which just happen. Okay? So that we know how to make our relation to them in the way that doesn't harm us. Okay? You look how Allah has wisely planned everything. So we are concerned about the things which are new and every bad act or good act, every bad habit or good habit, also we are very much attentive to that in the first place because it's new to us. But gradually, my attention would be diverted to the other things which would be new for me. And I would be very easily forgetting these things. Okay? So, something that we can learn from self-knowledge is that we should be much more observing ourselves and reviewing ourselves and assessing ourselves. We should not just let things happen to us and then become familiar and then we forget them. In other words, you must always go deep into your soul, into your acts, look carefully about what you say, unearth what is hidden inside your soul, so that if there is anything bad which is left unattended, appear. Otherwise, it's very easy that you forget everything and everything looks normal. Why? Because these are not new things. Sometimes you have bad habit and this bad habit is there for years. So it's very unlikely that you notice unless you have a policy, you have a real plan to find them, to discover them. Okay? In other words, a mu'min is the one who actively regulates and directs his attention. Doesn't let it to just be directed towards what is new. Whether new or old is not important. A mu'min is able to go into different corners of his heart, his soul, his mind, and find whatever bad is there to get rid of that. So it's very unlikely that something remains unnoticed for a mu'min. And something that can help us is the advice that we can receive from our fellow brothers and sisters. Because sometimes we don't notice those problems in us. But our brother or sister, they notice this. Because this is not something which has become part of them, something which is very old and established. And this is why we say, Al-mu'min mir'atul mu'min. A mu'min is to act as a mirror for his fellow mu'min. Another thing which is very important is to read the Quran and apply every verse of the Quran to yourself. So by this you can always check yourself against the verses of the Quran. So something which is very important, and this is my last point. First, be totally alert in the first place. Whatever you are going to do for the first time, whatever decision you are going to make for the first time, whatever friendship you are going to make, be very alert, because you may not have this alertness forever. So do not let anything happen and say, okay, later I come and think about it. No, there is no guarantee that you would even notice this in future. So first, be totally alert and conscious. And second, which is very also important, always try to dig and unearth your own soul and mind and find the things which may have been there for many years unnoticed. Sometimes you may just have happened that you have certain relation with someone. For example, you have, for example, bad relation with your neighbor or with your, for example, a spouse or your cousin or whatsoever. And you don't go for the reason, for the roots, because it's always there. You always, for example, hate this person. And it has become normal. So go deeper and find, when did it start? Why did it start? Maybe I was not justified to have this hatred in the first place. So don't take anything for granted, especially when it is related to you. A mu'min must be always self-critical. This is very important. Before trying to criticize other people, we must criticize ourselves. And this gives you such a good feeling that if you realize that wrong relation started from you, this is very good. You know why? Because if you find that you were responsible, then you don't feel bad about other people. And because you so much love yourself, you don't feel even bad about yourself. But if you always think that other people are responsible, then you feel, oh, I live in a world that everyone is mad. Everyone is bad with me. Everyone is crazy. Then you say, why, I should live with these people? Why should I live at all? You always feel that everyone is, acting improperly. Everyone is against you. Everyone doesn't appreciate you. So you become very sad and you become, frustrated. While the reality is that the problem starts here. So if I criticize myself and I find problems here, so I would see that people are innocent. Of course, they may have some bad things, but it's not that they are always responsible. They are innocent. It's very much based on the way that I myself want to establish this relation. So this is also something that we learn from self-knowledge. Inshallah, in the next session, we will start the discussion about a spirit or soul and how we can prove that we have immaterial soul or spirit. It's not just the body that we have. Thank you very much for your attention. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.